All right, we're getting into a good groove now. Let's get it started.
Alright, give me one more second here.
Did you start recording already?
Yeah, should be recording. Yeah.
Did we say anything funny for the cold open?
I don't know.
That was a nice move by Pipkins, taking it right to the rack himself. Wide open three, left wing, and it's good. Nylon, the dunk likes that, Matt.
A three from the right side, and it's good! The one, Pipkins, the man, yet again.
Hello and welcome to The Flex. I'm Matt St. Jean.
And this is Joe Howie.
And we're back continuing with our Big East preview, and it's the Seton Hall Pirates, 5th in the Big East coaches preseason rankings, fresh off a strong season last year, 21-9, 13-5 in conference play, and a share of that Big East regular season title. Certainly a strong season, led by none other than Big East Player of the Year, Myles Powell. Now, Powell is gone. He's not going to be a part of this team anymore. He is on to the NBA. Quincy McKnight, also a big part of this team, gone. And the big man, Romaro Gill. That's 3 big pieces for Seton Hall that they won't be returning for this season. How's that going to impact the team, Jeff?
Yeah, Matt, I think, Quincy McKnight and Romaro Gill really kind of get lost in the shuffle when you look at the rebuild of the Seton Hall team. Everyone thinks Big East Player of the Year, Myles Powell. And listen, he was a really, really talented player. One of my favorite players to watch in the Big East that wasn't in the Providence uniform. Scored just over 20 points a game. He was their leading scorer, and he could beat you in a variety of different ways. But let's not forget about their point guard, Quincy McKnight, and their big man, Romaro Gill. Quincy McKnight led the team in assists with just over 5 a game and was the team's 3rd leading scorer. And Romaro Gill led the league in blocks. I mean, those are 2 pieces to the puzzle that really brought everything together. I think the best example of this is in December, there was a patch of games where Myles Powell was out, and Seton Hall still had some quality resume building wins. So I really don't think that the loss of Myles Powell is what's going to cause the Seton Hall team to decline. I think it's the loss of 3 guys that made up a well-rounded roster and probably one of the deepest teams in the Big East and definitely the country last season.
Absolutely, and you can't tell the story of last year's Seton Hall team without talking about the injuries. Myles Powell went down. Also, 6'11" forward Sandro Mamukelashvili missed 10 games, I believe 10 or 11 games with an injury. And this is a team was still at the top of the Big East at the end of the year. So you've got Mamukelashvili coming back among others. A starting lineup that looks like it's going to be Bryce Aiken, Myles Powell, Jared Rhoden, Mamukelashvili, and Obiagu. How do these guys fill in for the pieces that they lost from last year? And do you think this team can compete in the Big East this year?
Yeah, first and foremost, this team is definitely going to compete in the Big East this year. You returned Sandro Mamukelashvili. Wow, that's a mouthful. We'll call him Mamu for short.
Yeah,
But
big
you
Mamu.
return Mamu, who is a fan favorite at the Prudential Center for the Pirates. By the way, it's highway robbery that Jeremiah Robinson Earl got first team All Big East over Mamu. I think that's a nod to Villanova, but Mamu
Yeah.
definitely deserved that. But anyway, you have him essentially leading the pack here, but at the 4, leading the pack in a more traditional sense in terms of the playmaking point guard, you have Bryce Aiken, the Harvard transfer, averaged just over 16 a game last season. He is going to be Myles Powell's replacement, but at the 1. And then you have Myles Powell and Jared Rhoden. Myles Powell will be Quincy McKnight's replacement, but at sort of a 2/wing mix. And then you have Jared Rhoden at the wing. So essentially, you're going to have a point guard, 2 wings, a power forward, and let's not forget Obiagu, the big 7-footer who steps right into the shoes of Romaro Gill in the paint. So I think you have another well-rounded team here that's long, offensive, and defensive.
For sure. I mean, Aiken's a guy, he comes in from Harvard. Like you said, he's a scorer, knows how to play the pick and roll, which Seton Hall did last year. And the pick and roll usually works pretty well when it's paired with not 1, but 2 guys who are 6'11" or bigger and can score and play at both ends of the floor.
Yeah, Matt, the pick and roll was Seton Hall's bread and butter last year. In the moments when Myles Powell wasn't shining, Quincy McKnight was dumping the ball to Romaro Gill, and he was just slamming it over every big man in the Big East's head. It was, oh my God, when Providence played at Seton Hall, what did he have? 8 dunks? It was a career night for him.
Mhm.
And I mean, Providence has some big guys. You got 6'10" Nate Watson, and then you had 6'9" Khalif Young. But I mean, the dominance of Roe Gill in the paint. And this is where Seton Hall has somewhat of a smooth transition of power because you're going to have a playmaking point guard and two playmaking wings coming in that Myles Powell and Jared Rhoden, who have been through the system. You have Bryce Aiken, who of course is going to go through a learning curve. But if you can dump the ball down to Mamu and Obiagu in the paint, you're going to see a very similar offensive flow that the Pirates saw last season.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly one that worked for them. I think you're going to see a drop off on the offensive end, not only with losing Myles Powell, but Quincy McKnight is a true scoring guard, and neither Myles Cale or Jared Rhoden has quite that scoring ability. They're more of a factor on the defensive end of the floor. But like we just talked about with Marquette, I think there's similarities there. Both losing their top scorer, who's a Big East Player of the Year. Both of them have some size. Both of them have a 6'11" guy starting at the four. And I think both of these teams are ones that are going to improve on defense to help transition away from losing an offensive superstar. I know we have Seton Hall ahead of Marquette. The Big East has Seton Hall ahead of Marquette. Why do you think with teams that are transitioning in similar ways, why should Seton Hall be getting the nod over Marquette in these projections?
I think first and foremost, you have to look at the depth of each team. Marquette returns a very small handful of players that actually had legitimate roles last season, whereas Hall has starters and they have bench players that are going to play big roles in this team. One player that comes to mind right away is Shavar Reynolds. He's going to be a backup guard on this team that can come in and stroke it from beyond the arc. For all you Providence listeners, he's similar to a Malik White type of player. You know, not a true point guard, but he'll run the point if needed. He's a good combo and he's a good shooter. He's going to be one of the difference makers for the Seton Hall offense, especially because in their starting lineup, their power forward is arguably their best 3-point shooter.
Yeah, Mamu Kalashvili was the second highest percentage 3-point shooter last year, which you don't see a lot from a 6'11" guy, and it's what makes Seton Hall so hard to defend on the pick and roll. If Mamu Kalashvili is going to roll, he can roll out beyond the arc and drain a three in your face. And I mean, that's not something that you're going to see Nate Watson do for the Friars, I can tell you that. Um, Looking at some of the other names coming off the bench, you've got Takal Molson, who is the transfer from Canisius, who averaged almost 17 points a game there 2 years ago. And Tyrese Samuel, 6'10" sophomore. They're churning out these big guys out of New Jersey right now. So I think it's pretty clear you've got one backup guard, one backup wing forward, and one backup center who can rotate through and give some depth to the Seton Hall lineup.
And you know, Matt, not to mention, I personally am a fan of an 8 to 9 man rotation. I know Seton Hall does bring in a couple of other guys that we'll talk about in a moment, but I like a shorter rotation off the bench. I think it gives the guys that are playing a little less time to get cold on the bench and a little more time to really mesh together. Providence in the 2018-2019 season had close to a 10-11 man rotation until the very end of the season when it started to click. I think the fewer players that you have coming off of the bench in games helps you off better off in the long run. Now, don't get me wrong. That's not to say that having a deep bench is a bad thing because if someone gets hurt, you know, it's next man up and you have to have guys ready to play. But I think when you're in the flow of a game, having a shorter bench to come in and give guys a breather is definitely not a bad thing, especially for a team like Seton Hall who needs to recover after losing Myles Powell.
Consistency always a good thing for a lineup. And like we said, you can't talk about Seton Hall without bringing up injury concerns. Mamu missed significant time last year. Bryce Aiken has not played a full season since his freshman year at Harvard. So I think guard is certainly a position where if Seton Hall gets injuries there, Then you're starting to look at a freshman like Jahari Long coming in to start at point guard. Things get a little bit hairy. You're also going to have Dominguez Stevens. I believe that's how you say that. The 6'5" freshman coming off the bench. He should be able to shoot and give some depth scoring. And Jeff Ngandu, who's your 6'9" big guy, I don't think he'll see a lot of time. But you throw these names together, and I think this roster is a matchup nightmare for broadcasters with names like Sandro Mamukelashvili, Ike Obiagu, Dekal Molson, Dominguez Stevens, Jeff Ngandu. Brings me back to those days. You're flipping through the media guide trying to find out exactly where the pronunciation guide is. That way you don't butcher a name on air.
Matt, I'm not going to bother to try and say all the names you just did, but I think you add, those 5 or 6 guys with Paulie Polycap and Scooby Johnson, and you've got your first team all Big East intriguing names that are tough to say. I don't even know what you'd call that first team, but you have a good roster of names right there.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something to watch for as a fan at home in Big East play this year. Look at the broadcasters, see how they deal with some of this stuff. It's I'd say it's much easier said than done, but in broadcasting, those are one and the same. Now let's wrap up here. Take a look at the schedule that's out for Seton Hall right now. They are scheduled to start Wednesday, November 25th against Winthrop. They've been dealing with some COVID concerns and have been shut down. So we may see adjustments to the schedule between now and whenever the next game is played. They start against Winthrop. They've got a game at Louisville, a game at home against preseason number 1 in KenPom, Baylor. They get URI. Providence doesn't. But Seton Hall will play at URI, and they have a road game at Penn State before starting against DePaul. So really, you look at that, there's only one surefire win in that non-conference schedule by my evaluation. What are your thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, I think that's a gritty non-conference schedule. I'm looking at ESPN, and the Winthrop game isn't even listed, so maybe it got canceled because of COVID, but altogether, I don't know. Baylor, that's going to be a tough one. That's a nice, bucket of ice water on you right in the morning for a comparison of that game as early in the season as you're going to get it. URI, they'll smack them around. I mean, everyone smacks around URI. Not us, though. Not us. Penn State should be a good game. Hopefully Trace McSorley's there. No, but what I find interesting here, too, is then Seton Hall picks up conference play. They start at home against DePaul. They go on a 2-game road trip at Xavier, at Marquette, before coming home against Providence and Georgetown. I think in these first 5 Big East games, Seton Hall has the opportunity to go 4-1. You beat DePaul at home, you beat Xavier on the road, you beat Marquette on the road, you lose at home to Providence, and you beat Georgetown at home. Well, I mean, just looking at these teams here, I think Providence is the only team here that's ranked higher in the Big East preseason rankings than Seton Hall. Of course, these games are in the middle of December, so a lot of things are subject to change by then. But really, Seton Hall in conference play has the ability to make up some ground that they have the potential to lose in their non-conference play.
Yeah. And I think you look at some of those opponents. It's interesting, number one, when you look at the schedule on KenPom versus ESPN, it's 2 different schedules for Seton Hall right now. That tells you where we're at, and we're a week until the season starts. But if you lose to Louisville and Baylor and win the other games, I don't think they're going to be penalized too heavily for that in the polls, as long as the games are close, as long as they're competitive. But again, like we've talked about with some other teams, there's not a lot of ramp-up time. You got to be ready to go from the start, and that's going to be a challenge this year for sure for Seton Hall. Any last word, Jeff?
Just a quick note, this Baylor game gives me the Michigan State Seton Hall game vibes from November of last season. And let's not forget, Seton Hall lost that game, but it was a very, very close game. The Cassius Winston, Myles Powell matchup was spectacular. I remember watching that game at Whiskey Republic thinking, like, Seton Hall lost, but damn, that was a good game against 2 quality power school teams. So I think that Baylor game is going to resemble something along the lines of what we saw last season.
Hopefully we get a good one there. This should wrap it up for Seton Hall. The Pirates looking for a 6th straight NCAA tournament season, looking to come back off of the share of a Big East regular season title. It'll be an interesting season for sure. But this has been The Flex. As always, you can follow us on Twitter at TheFlexHoops. You might be listening to this on Spotify or Apple Music. If you are, be sure to give us a follow there to stay tuned for the latest episodes. But as always, thank you for listening.
Go Friars.